And while it's always nice to gather together, I am enjoying the fact that I am recognizing more and more faces, people that we see every week. So we thank you for your dedication to continue to engage in these trainings. And we also acknowledge there are a lot of people who are watching this on YouTube or viewing the video afterward as well. Because as much of an emphasis as we put on connections, sometimes we don't see all of the connections we have. So we want to particularly acknowledge our colleagues and allies who are with us but not visible on the screen. And together we engage in this work. So as you begin this training today, we invite you to check in with yourself and identify where you are on this number scale. And as always, notice how it changes throughout our time together. We'll begin today with a very brief reminder of one aspect of our week 4 discussion. As you will recall, we reviewed a case study of an experiment that a teacher did in a classroom. And a teacher was able to make an arbitrary distinction between groups, such as blue-eyed students are different from brown-eyed students. And simply declaring that uh, created a context where bullying quickly emerged. And therefore, we must conclude that focusing on our differences can create bullying. So focusing on our common connections can help reduce bullying. And we've talked this entire training series about the importance of connection, but this is a theme that we will continue to reinforce. But connection is an interesting phenomenon. It takes more than one person to have connection. Connection does not happen in isolation. But at the same time, all we can really control is ourselves. So this raises the question, how can we set the circumstances in ourselves that can uh, lead to opportunities for connection? What are the skills and attributes that we can work on developing within ourselves that can increase our ability to be in connection? And there are many answers to that question, because improving one part of our system, like in nature, improves the whole system. For instance, developing a mindfulness practice can allow a person to be less impacted by stress. At the same time, having access to nutritious foods can help people learn and grow and be generally healthy. And having healthy workplaces and healthy schools allow people to be in connection peacefully. But again, the question is, which aspects of our ecosystem are within our power to influence? So to answer that question, we look at some of the common themes that we have found through research that helps support connection building. Now, we hope that most of these themes are familiar to you at this point. For example, number 2, we've been talking about it all day. But also, we want to highlight the bottom 3 items on this list. One of the reasons that using art to create context is important is because it can shift us out of problematic power dynamics. And art is essentially metaphoric communication. Not only is it a creative and generative way of communicating, but the slightly indirect nature of communicating via metaphor allows for difficult topics to have a lower temperature. Yeah. Plus, the amount and type of information communicated through music, dance, drawing, etc., um, can be very rich. It reminds me of the English phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. As for the fifth item on this list, this is more of a direct approach. Using the information that we have learned about what creates bullying and what bullying is, we can identify problematic social circles if and when they arise. So if there are situations where we see targeted behavior that uses a power imbalance to harm someone else, then we are identifying a potential situation of problematic social dynamics. So using the information from the first few weeks of our training, um, we know how to identify it, and then the other items on this list are good suggestions of what to do about it. And one final note about the last item on this list. When a situation is safe for all participants, it can be helpful to simulate a bullying situation and then simulate ways of intervening. Simulated situations can be very powerful learning tools. However, if the situation is not safe for all participants, simulations can be harmful. Even in the example of the classroom divided by blue eyes and brown eyes, we see evidence of harm. Within a single day, there were students getting into fights and brown-eyed students breaking down, crying, wondering, what is wrong with me? So while we can always encourage teaching kindness and empathy and creating connection, we invite you to be judicious about your application of a simulation. But here is one additional tool that you can use. Perhaps you have heard of this term grit, which has become popular in psychology terms. But we want to introduce it into this conversation as one way that the individual can work to prepare themselves to build connection. And so we will spend a little bit of time reviewing the core concepts of this notion of grit. The term as we are using it was made popular by the psychologist Angela Duckworth. And I want to pause and acknowledge this picture that we found of Dr. Duckworth. You may recall from a couple of weeks ago, we talked about your superhero power pose. And rather conveniently, Dr. Duckworth is demonstrating that for us. So how can we make grit one of our superpowers? Well, first, we need to understand what grit is. Perseverance, passion, long-term goals, and growth mindset. So grit includes having a growth mindset, and here are some examples of what that means. Adopting a growth mindset enables us to make meaning out of challenges. Having a growth mindset keeps us open to possibilities. And cultivating openness can also support cultivating connections. By contrast, being fixed and closed is not helpful in generating connections. And I'm using the word cultivate when talking about a growth mindset on purpose because this requires work and nurturing, especially if we have been harmed by other people. um, a growth mindset may not come naturally, but because we have all experienced moments of resilience and connection, everyone has at least a little seed of grit in them. Some plants grow and flower very easily with no support, and others need to be tended and cared for in order for them to bloom. So if this has not come naturally to you, I invite you to see if you can apply any of the three quotes from the growth mindset in your life. We also want to highlight the importance of having a long-term focus. Sometimes there are successes and sometimes there are struggles. When we were talking about this concept as a group, the metaphor of tides came to us.
Прийшла до нас.
And I like this diagram on this slide here because it shows how a pond can form when the waters come and go. As creatures that exist within ecosystems, we are constantly reminded that there are cycles to everything.
Я
And so it makes sense that confidence and success may also rise and fall. And so seeking to have a long-term focus provides us with the wisdom to understand this is part of a cycle. Two of the other points we want to share with you about grit are passion and perseverance. And perseverance is somewhat similar to that long-term understanding of cycles.
Мгм.
And I particularly like Dr. Duckworth's reminder that sometimes success means just not giving up. Now, Duckworth also says that having passion for what you are doing matters. But I want to take a moment and share with you a little bit of the history of the word passion, which I think is helpful to understand it here. Today, passion is something that we love or are dedicated to, but the original Latin root of the word passion, pati, means suffering. So how do we go from suffering to love? Well, the helpful explanation is to consider things you are passionate about to be things that you are willing to suffer for. And the more we understand what we are passionate about, the more motivated we can be to persevere. One more slide describing elements of grit. The first one, interest, is similar to passion. The second piece is to practice. But to practice is not just to engage in repetition of something. Rather, it is deliberate, purposeful, and intentional skill development. So to develop a general capacity for grit, you can try this deliberate practice with anything. You can deliberately practice how you breathe. You can intentionally look someone in the eye and greet them warmly whenever you see someone. And you can deliberately play the violin to increase your skills. The third and fourth pillars of grit are connected. Having purpose and having hope are looking to the long term. I like this quote from Duckworth here that purpose is the intention to contribute to the well-being of others. For those of you who have been in previous trainings with us, you may recall that we did a prolonged series on 8 different types of hope. So, in some ways, Dr. Duckworth is giving us a 9th definition of hope. And in this definition, she is applying a similar concept to what we talked about for practice, in that we are working to make tomorrow better, not just wishing for it to be better. Now, you will see here a similarity between this definition of hope and the definition of a bystander that we seek to become. If we are a bystander to bullying, then we should seek to be a defender of the target. And that is working to make tomorrow better, not just passively wishing for it to be better. So we happen to find in newspapers in the United States a few examples of grit from your country. And these are stories in which mushrooms have become points of inspiration for people. And I don't know how the word grit translates, but in English, grit also has a connotation of being sort of in the dirt. So it's convenient that we have our nature ecosystem metaphor. We have grit, and we have Ukrainian examples of Duckworth's type of grit, all found in these stories. And very briefly, the first story is about people planting mushrooms, cultivating mushrooms in order to regrow their physical ecosystem. The second story is about people cultivating their culture, making human connections by working together to gather mushrooms. But before we run out of time today, I would like to invite my colleague Trish to offer us a closing activity.
Yeah, Irina, just like this example of uh, this example of mushrooms, it reminded her, I shared with you when they shelled the Ahmadiyya, the children, remember Children Hospital? We met that day and I shared it with you. Yeah, so, and when people united together and brought food and the water and everything and like help each other, so that level of connection reminded. Thank you, Irina. Спасибо, Irina.
It's beautiful, and we are all connected in different ways to nature. So we want to continue with that spirit next week.